you know? And the reason why, because I fucked off and I went traveling for a bit. I went to Korea and Japan actually. So I went to Korea around just Seoul, Busan, and went to Tokyo. And basically right now I'm just editing all that content for my main, my main Instagram account, and and kind of editing like a YouTube video. And I just want to kind of even just kind of talk about that, why you should travel overseas, because not many people talk about this. Well, I think people do, but I just want to just share from my perspective of what I learned from going from Korea and Japan, and kind of like give me a different perspective on how I see things. Because what I learned from traveling overseas or going over to Korea, Japan, is that you learn a lot how people do their things. It gives you a bit of a different perspective in terms of like how people eat, the courtesy, the different ways of living. For example, right, when I was in Korea, right, normally when you finish your food in let's say in Australia, right, you just leave it and you just walk off, right? Especially at the restaurant, because the waitress, all those people will just pick up and then grab it and all that. But in Korea, it's actually considered rude to do that. In Korea, when you finish your food, you have to take it back to the tray. That's just a common courtesy, because that's just how they do it. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's a bit more formal how to do it. And what I can tell you is, like, when you travel overseas, especially if it's a country that you're not really familiar, it's a bit of a culture shock of how people do things. Like, for example, right, when I was in Seoul in South Korea, right, everything opens late. Like, everything opens 11 a.m. because Korea is a very night city. Seoul is it's a very night city vibe, because everything opens late. Like for example, every night in South Korea, like it's such a like it's like the nightlife was like partying, a lot of people around. And personally for me, I'm not really like a party animal guy. Like, I don't go around partying, fucking chicks, all that bullshit. Like, I'm not that type of guy. I just want to play around. But it was interesting because, like, I was with a friend who I went to Korea with, and he lives out more like the eastern suburbs of Sydney, right? Because in Sydney, right, if you know Sydney well, a bit of Sydney context is that Sydney's very is such a very morning city, and like everything opens at like 5 a.m. or at like 4 a.m. Around 5 a.m. Like all the cafes, especially you live out like like all like the populous for like Coogee, Bondi, everything's like it's more like people go for their run clubs and go for the morning swims, and when we are in Korea, like my friend wasn't used to everything opening late, because Korea is such a night city. And what it tells me is that it's actually when you travel overseas, helps you to be more open, and actually pushes you outside your comfort zone. Because the problem when you stay in your hometown too long, or stay in a place too long, is you kind of get pretty rigid in your own ways. Like, for example, you get rigid in terms of like trying different things. And when you become rigid, it becomes a bit of a comfort zone. Like, you see it as a comfort thing to do. Like, for example, for him, right, he thinks that, because waking up later in Korea was a bit of a comfort zone, because nothing opens early in Seoul. And there's nothing wrong with like having like a routine, and at the same time being rigid. Because let's say, like, if you're like someone who's gone really like successful in terms of like business or fitness, right, and if you got there by like a certain routine, then yes, it's good to be rigid in that sense. But at the same time, right, sometimes you have to you know push yourself outside your comfort zone to learn. Because if you don't push yourself outside your comfort zone, then you stop growing as a person. And I think that's what I like about traveling, because traveling forces you to be a bit more open. It forces you to be pushes you outside your comfort zone. For example, especially when it comes to learning the language as well, it teaches you how to, know, trains your brain to engage more. Yeah, like what do you think you see all these like like all these like corporate wanker guys, right? Who's been working at the same job since they were 40 or 50, but they've been working there for 30 years because they became complacent and became rigid. And the best thing about travel is travel teaches you to be more open. It teaches you to like use your brain more, to think, instead of sticking in your own ways. Like especially if you're someone who grew up in like a whitewashed country, like say Australia, right? Especially Sydney, right? If you grew up in that area, then you just think the same. And sometimes it's good to be more open, to try something new. You've got to change your brain to adapt to new things. Because when you become too rigid, you become kind of complacent and you like to stick to your own ways. That's why like a lot of like 40-year-olds or 50-year-old people struggle to try something different because they're so used to doing the same thing over and over again. They're just so used to it. And that's why, in my opinion, it's like if you're in your 20s, you got to be open to try as much as possible. Because if you try a lot of things in your 20s, then it trains your brain to be more open. Because by the time you hit your 30s, because as you get older, you become a bit more rigid because you end up becoming sticking your own ways. That's why, for example, all the time, I'm always trying to push outside my comfort zone. Always push to do things that I haven't done before. Like kind of experiment with myself so I can know who I am as a person. Because that's the only way I can grow and become the person I want to go. So that's what I want to kind of talk about when it comes to traveling. Because traveling teaches you to use more your brain and actually discover things that you don't normally see. And also you understand how different countries work. Like for example, like in Japan, right, the train system and the bullet train is so advanced compared to obviously Australia, Sydney. Sydney, Australia it's not advanced, but that's because they got a big population. But at the same time, like Tokyo is such a fast-paced city. Like it's like everything's so fast. Like everything's fast, dense, and some people might not like that. But at the same time, you learn how people's way of living is different. Like, it gives you a different perspective of how you see the world. Because when you like stick around your hometown, right, you only see things in black and white. You become rigid, right? But when you start traveling more, right, it opens your brain up more. And yeah, I reckon traveling is probably one of the best investments, Some people might think it's not, some people think it's controversial, it's a waste of time, but it depends what type of travel you do. Like, if you do the local travel, I think it's a good investment. But if you do like the fucking pussy travel, the fucking vacation shit, that's the gay travel shit. Like the gay travel where you like, oh yeah, go on holidays, take the piss of the boys, that's the gay shit, bro. Then you're a fucking idiot. I know, and there's nothing wrong with people who are like that, who travel for vacation. Like, fair enough, that might be their downtime. But I think that's the shit travel. Then they're not really a travel person, Because if you're a true traveler, you go for more for adventure, embrace the new culture, learn the new experiences. That's the real travel. But yeah, that's what I've got to say. So, anyways, besides that, I'm out. Peace.